Easy go.
iHeartRadio, mostly music radio, said this week it was laying off 30% of its workforce nationwide, abruptly removing the blogs and bios of some of its biggest personalities.
It has been a bad week for the radio industry. iHeartMedia, the nation's largest radio station group owner, has laid off as many as 1,000 nationwide, according to reports, as part of a restructuring.
As the radio industry faces a day of reckoning.
Reports swirling that iHeartMedia is laying off numerous on-air personalities.
A number of people being laid off this week at several local radio stations owned by iHeartRadio.
A business decision by the companies, but the impact on laid-off workers is personal.
The company says it's going through a technology transformation, and it appears that technology transformation is going to include some layoffs.
The company made the cuts nationwide this week, saying investments in technology and artificial intelligence made these moves possible.
This is iHeartMedia, the world's leading owner of radio stations. iHeart owns 858 stations in 153 cities, a media industry leader in content creation and innovation, and one of the most antagonized companies following a January 2020 employee overhaul, displacing over 1,500 media professionals. One of these professionals is Dan Rios, former morning show co-host of Rex and Rios on Roxy 101 in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Rex and Rios are two guys in the morning on C101. What's up, it's Dan Rios. We're live here at Total Wine and More. It's the worst that I've seen any company come in and totally go backwards on what we've always told our clients, people that have advertised with us.
It's the morning of January 14th, 2020. Just another Tuesday morning for Dan and the thousands of iHeart workers nationwide, reporting to work for morning shows, commercial production, sales, and engineering. Many of them having no idea that this would be their last day with the company.
I had it great. I thought I had already, put it on cruise control and I was just going to hang out there for a good while, but, they had other plans.
These other plans took jobs away from hundreds of others as well, including Cincinnati production director Mark Erickson.
And even though you probably won't stick with it, just saying, iHeartRadio is here to help you keep that New Year's resolution to get in shape.
On one end, it's, hey, we're doing some great things and we're going to, we're cutting edge and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Oh, by the way, we have to get rid of, 2,000 people. But other than that, we're going places.
A sacrifice that changed hundreds of lives in an instant. All in the name of new technology and artificial intelligence. Okay, Google, what is artificial intelligence?
Here's a summary from Wikipedia. Artificial intelligence is intelligence demonstrated by machines, unlike the natural intelligence displayed by humans and animals.
Well, kind of. AI technology in radio? That's all about replacing jobs.
The fact that they can hit segues and dissolve music seamlessly and no gaps between the music.
Some of the many tasks performed by employees such as Aaron Salazar, who was laid off twice by iHeart in Salt Lake City.
I was the assistant program director for KJMY, a hot AC station. And I didn't see the layoff coming, but I always knew it was in the back of my mind. It's just, okay, I just always had this bad feeling like, man, someday they're going to walk in and I'm out.
Aaron says it's all about consolidating these tasks.
Why have one person in every market programming a hot AC station when we can have 3 people in the entire company programming the 850 stations?
A concept in radio that is all too familiar for longtime professionals.
You're never safe in the radio industry because they're just consolidating and consolidating. They're trying to pay as few people as possible and make the biggest amount of money as they can.
As for iHeart, the layoffs proved to be a culmination of various new policies and procedures, collaborating to produce one catastrophic event. One of these new procedures is not so affectionately known as iHeart Custom.
Say you have a small market, Bakersfield, California, tiny, and you want to put on a hot AC station, but you don't want to pay anybody to do it, to run it. Let's just use iHeart Custom. It's a station in a box.
A station in a box is one reason you hear the same songs over and over again. A major complaint among frequent radio listeners.
I listen to a good amount of radio, I would say. I at least listen to radio in the morning and on the weekends.
I think I like radio to hear different things that I wouldn't normally hear, say if I was streaming my own music.
It annoys me when radio stations play the same song over and over again.
So I do believe that radio stations I listen to play a lot of the same songs to the point where they become overplayed and you don't want to listen to them anymore.
I think PXY is typically known for that, just playing the same hit over and over and over again.
Karen from Elba. Debbie from Victor. I'm Sierra from Hilton.
Commercial-free PXY music.
The #1 hit music station, 98 PXY.
And if I don't feel like listening to it, then I'll switch to another channel. The only issue is when there is a song that's playing over and over again, if you try to go to another channel that you do like, there's a good chance they're also playing the same song.
They know what we want to listen to and they're trying to give it to us, but at the same time, it's coming off as annoying. So I don't know where there's a happy medium, but I wish they didn't play the same song over and over again.
Repetition like this isn't always the ideal model for these stations, boasting on the new hits they crank out song after song. But when it comes to iHeart, it's all about the amount of stations they can get on the air with as little staff as possible, not the quality of the individual station. A sacrifice of artificial intelligence many believe hasn't paid off.
iHeart really hasn't gone to like some kind of new plateau with their AI like they've claimed that they have. From what I've read anyway, I think their big claim to fame is being able to do crossfades and segues, great, and to be able to kind of basically make their digital streams sound more radio-like. Sound like if there's a guy behind the board, pushing the buttons and stuff.
That person behind the board used to be Amy Brooks, midday host of Rock 104.7 and assistant program director of 101.5 The River in Toledo, Ohio.
I mean, it definitely was an essential person in making these stations run, and we would schedule the music locally, which means that we had control over what we played. And then it slowly started going more corporate.
It's good for small markets, I think. From a financial standpoint, like when you don't have a budget and you want to put something on, it's a good option. But when you try to apply it to larger markets, it's not as good.
I watched it shift from the program director having complete control, programming a station, to really developing the feel, the mood of the station, to somebody who's not even in the market, who doesn't know the region and what people around here want to hear.
Programming a radio station is like doing a garden. The more time, effort, energy, and money that you put into it, the more that you're going to get out of it. But say if you just want to throw in, like, I just want tomatoes and that's it. Okay, you want what size of tomatoes? Don't care. What brand of tomatoes? I don't care, I just want tomatoes. Okay, here's some tomatoes. Not everybody's going to like it, but you're getting what you asked for.
Many iHeart custom stations nationwide follow the same formulas, play the same music, and even have the same personalities.
They're already doing it now where they're attempting to make the talent that they're piping in, attempting to make it sound local. Basically what they do is they record themselves saying the station name, say, hey, C101, and then it comes in with their track right after it, which is very obvious to me, but I have an ear for that.
Take a listen to this real break taken from 107.3 The Bull, an iHeart country station in Rochester, New York.
107.3 The Bull. We want to pay your bills. Hey, it's Amy James. 12 chances today to win $1,000 instantly. Wishing you luck. The next nationwide keywords coming up. Order.
Typical, right? Why would you have any reason to say that Amy James is actually broadcasting in Atlanta and not Rochester? Listen again.
107.3 The Bull. We want to pay your bill.
Do you hear the difference?
107.3 The Bull. We want to pay your bill.
This was recorded once.
107.3 The Bull.
It's played before every break.
107.3 The Bull.
Slight difference.
The Bull. We want to pay your.
So they record every station name they're on once.
107.3 The Bull.
Then they can tag the rest of what they say to hundreds of station names.
We want to pay your.
Doing hundreds times less the work.
107.3 The Bull. We want to pay your bill.
Now listen for it. This is Kiss 106.7, a hit music station in Rochester.
Kiss 106.7, all the hits for Rochester. By the way, Harry Styles dropping a new music video for his new song Golden. Got to check it out. It's on my Twitter. My name is Raph.
Raph, a self-proclaimed radio ninja from Philadelphia. He's doing that same break for many iHeart hit music stations. Listen again.
Kiss 106.7, all the hits for Rochester. By the way, Harry Styles dropped...
Hear the pause? That's a good indication that this is a standalone audio file.
Kiss 106.7, all the hits for Rochester.
Then,
by the way, Harry Styles dropping...
The break starts. Raph only said this once in his life.
Kiss 106.7, all the hits for Rochester.
Now, he gets to say this.
By the way, Harry Styles
for all of his markets. And you can be confident he's nowhere near Rochester. Here's a station called 97.5 FM in Waco, Texas.
97.5 FM. Now Horan with
Recognize the voice?
Dark Studio looks very...
That's Ryan Seacrest, a syndicated radio superstar. Clearly not in Waco, Texas. But he says the station name.
97.5 FM.
Of course, pre-recorded. And as it turns out, all of Ryan Seacrest is pre-recorded. The host is on these stations nationwide, just not all at the same time. Syndication is no unusual concept in radio, but for iHeart, it has become by far the norm, no longer the exception. In fact, in some sizable cities, there are fewer iHeart on-air personalities than iHeart stations, which some argue is detrimental to the radio industry.
It's very generic. There's no heart. And basically what the AI, what is happening is it's becoming less and less what people want from radio and more into the corporate machine where there's absolutely no heart and it's all how can we make money.
When it first came around, it was basically, it wasn't meant to push out the on-air person. It was meant to enhance the abilities that you had as an on-air person. We were able to be in two places at one time, because if you had a small staff, you could be on your way out to a live location while you're still hearing yourself in the car, because you recorded it earlier. So it was for things like that, but not necessarily meant to replace anybody.
The local people go to the radio for breaking news, for tornadoes and stuff like that. Oh, well, in that case, get your talent to pre-record something that you can plug in saying, we have a local, there's a weather situation happening. It's like, well, if that happens, then you're going to have this already from them voiced, so you can plug it in and you get them to say anything. And then if, you have the occasion to use it, oh, I've got them saying that.
It's very obvious to me, but I have an ear for that. Maybe people don't hear it and they just goes in one ear out the other, and it really doesn't matter to them. But yeah, I catch it whenever I hear it.
Here in Toledo, one of the outer cities is mommy. Well, you got anybody from out of the market trying to say, just words like city, like mommy, it's always Maumee.
It still takes somebody local to write the imaging, write the feel, the tone. Somebody local has to write the scripts to tell them what to do. And then it comes back, you load it up, done.
There are some things that you just can't hide, and it doesn't fool anybody, to get people who are not from the city, not from the area, who get in there and just say, something like, well, you could check it out at the station's website. Okay, what website?
The reason why people love radio, why it's successful, is because of the local talent. That type of connection you can't get from a crossfade or a segue that AI is going to do for you.
Changes have been made all across the board. It's not only on-air staff that has felt the difference, but innovations on the business side have eliminated jobs as well.
iHeart's doing this thing called Ad Builder.
To help your advertising work harder, we created iHeart Ad Builder, the first self-serve platform for creating and running radio ads.
So this ad builder, the client goes there, puts in what they want to do. It goes to this script writer who then throws it onto a vCreative thing that then goes to the prod guy who then produces it, slams it back up, and then it spits back out on ad builder. The client goes yay or nay, and then, and then the real interesting thing about that is I believe that the client then can see exactly where they want to advertise, like inside of a commercial log. And it's kind of like, okay, I want to pick the 720 position here. And it also, they get a verification on the spot actually running, like in real time. So if you wanted to know, hey, your spot just ran or it's going to run, you would be able to tune in and listen and make sure it's doing everything that it wants. That's kind of, from a client standpoint, I would think that would be kind of cool.
Convenient for the client, but coming at a cost. iHeart has removed a large percentage of local sales staffs, as there's no need for media sales representatives when business will come to you.
It's more of a cost thing, absolutely. You're looking at, I've got a tight budget. I can't afford to pay a $50,000 salary to one person.
They're businessmen, and to see the importance of radio to shift to profit and to the sales and marketing side of things, you have to have a good product to present to the public. And then when you take away the local people, you take all of that away, they become inaccessible, and it's just another background noise. I mean, what's the point of even listening to local radio anymore?
It's blown out hundreds of sales careers, but it has held the company more accountable to their clients.
Let's say the spot did run, but it didn't necessarily run at that time, because maybe something goofed up. Well, you would just say it did run at that time. Well, it was kind of lying. Nowadays, they've got software. We couldn't do that anymore. You couldn't lie or go back in and change stuff to make the invoice look right. We'd run spots wrong for a whole month and didn't even know it.
iHeart Ad Builder is another example of innovation, like AI, that arguably accomplishes efficiency, but trims staff to a bare bones level. One of these remaining workers is Rochester producer and news reporter Matt Wilson.
From the WHAM 1180 newsroom, I'm Matt Wilson. 36-year-old Glenn Burden and 31-year-old Travis Johnson have been identified as the two men shot to death.
So one thing I don't like that's happening with the industry, and I think it's not just iHeart, I think it's as a whole, is that localized radio broadcasting is kind of going wayside. And because it's going that way, jobs that were available had to be cut. And I'm lucky that I've learned how to do so many different things at iHeart, because I could have also been a victim of this.
Matt has been fortunate to maintain the right skill set for the evolving company.
Once it went national, I lost that production job and I lost the spot on SUNY. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because I at least still kept my job. A lot of people got let go. And we're talking about program directors and talent and producers, a whole bevy of them who were actually really talented people.
There's lots of talented people in these small markets. Lots of talented people. I think the talent pool is not only 10 deep or 50 deep or even 100 deep. It's 1,000 deep or even more.
1,000 or more media professionals displaced because of mass consolidation on a corporate level, which, according to iHeart employees past and present, creates a disconnect.
So someone who's got like Elvis Duran in New York City, his show is like the morning show now on KISS 106.7, which is a local radio station here. So any local talent who wanted to be an on-air talent for a morning show on that local station is pretty much out, because a national show now gets coverage on that. And that's happened with a lot of the stations here. And because it's going that way, jobs that were available had to be cut.
Since they're so kind of disconnected from the actual communities that they say that they're so entrenched in and that they're, giving their, full attention to, it's really a lot of BS. It really is. I mean, the people that work there every day, like myself and the other talent that were there, are the ones that are connected with the community, or the ones that are putting their effort. And if they don't want to put the effort, then they don't. And, they go home that day and the community never gets served.
What they really want to do is, iHeart was not just radio, but we're also, digital online content. We're podcasts. And they're dipping their toe into all of these different things.
Save songs directly from live radio and custom artist stations with iHeartRadio Plus and iHeartRadio.
Even with the websites, even with social media, I never understood why the big push was to get people to go away from the radio station, which is basically what you're doing. You're telling them to this is great, but over here is something even better. Go this way.
Check out Popcorn Radio on the iHeartRadio app.
It's very backwards from what I've learned as far as like broadcasting goes. And
some call it supplementing the on-air product, while others feel that it's only abandoning it. Regardless, the push for podcasts has never been stronger.
My last couple of months there, it was all about the podcast, the iHeart podcasts. And they were making us, it was required that once a week we play a half-hour podcast.
We started our own podcast, and it was basically like doing the job twice, because we'd go in and do our morning show and then be expected to do this podcast. It was never really said, like, if you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble, or you're going to, we're going to reprimand you or something. But we pretty much knew we were going to have to go along with what was the trend in the building was doing these podcasts. And actually, it was pretty fun. It was good. The podcast was good.
Okay, whatever. I mean, there were some like good music podcasts, but then when they're playing stuff mishmashed, there was no rhyme or reason to why we were playing this particular podcast this week.
The push for podcasts from iHeartMedia came on really strong, and not just from a executive level, like the top people, telling us to push on the podcasts, but also on the air with promos. I mean, every other promo you'd hear that came from corporate was a promo to push the fact that iHeart is your number one podcast, platform.
The free iHeartRadio app is #1 for podcasts. Discover a new podcast from our library of over 350,000 titles. Here's an iHeartRadio podcast preview.
You say that enough times and it just becomes what it is. The only thing I had a problem with was how it kind of cannibalized on radio itself, because we're basically advertising to go somewhere else.
Advertising proven to be effective.
And even with me, I have 2 podcast shows. And the podcast shows were doing okay until iHeart allowed me to put them on iHeart. And once all of a sudden it says my podcast is an iHeart podcast, my numbers went up.
Podcast numbers on the rise, but terrestrial radio ratings continue to dip, which raises the question, are all of these new procedures hurting traditional radio? And more importantly, what is the future of traditional radio? An important question for aspiring media professionals, many of whom have taken classes with journalism professor Kim Young at the college at Brockport.
I'm honest, and I'm honest with my students. And again, I'm a journalism professor, and so my task is to talk to aspiring journalists. And I feel extremely excited about the future for journalism. I am honest about radio. I don't think that there's a great future in that. And I'm sorry to say that because it's where I started.
This is a tough industry to be in. It's cutthroat, it's low paying, but if you have a passion for it, it's almost like you're addicted to it and you don't want to let it go.
I loved radio. I was a news director at I'd gone from a small station in the Finger Lakes to Buffalo to a larger station to a public station to a commercial station. What I have seen, and I think one of the most disheartening changes that I've witnessed in my career in this time span is the corporatization of radio. These mom and pop stations have all been but gobbled up. I mean, there are a handful of stations that are singularly owned, but it's really a rarity.
Professor Young worked in radio as these industry-shaping changes were made.
When the Telecommunications Act was signed into law, it allowed for this kind of thing to take shape. And so you had before restrictions. The federal government restricted how many radio stations you could own in a market, or if you could own radio, you couldn't own a newspaper. And if you owned a newspaper, you could only own one radio. And so there were regulations and restrictions in place. The federal government had them. The Federal Communications Commission enforced them.
Deregulation kept the FCC out of the way of large companies, allowing them to buy out the smaller ones.
What I saw happening in the 90s really came to fruition. We talked about it, there was not much that could be done based on the Telecommunications Act signed by President Clinton. It was a free-for-all. And so you started seeing the consolidation of the marketplace where a handful of stations are owned by just a couple of companies. I feel terrible about what's happened, but again, for consumers, they certainly have a lot more choices.
On demand is really what has taken off right now. People like to get their podcast or like to Sirius Radio or anything like that. Things where you don't have to listen to commercials and you can listen to what you want when you want to listen to it.
I think it's not only just the question for radio, but it's also the question, obviously, for newspapers. It's the same sort of dilemma where you have now people have so many more avenues, so many more resources, so many more things to choose from. But I also have to say that there is great hope in public broadcasting. For people who really want some unbiased and just exceptional reporting. I think National Public Radio is well suited for people who really want that. And I also think PBS is just a viable entity that serves us in ways that perhaps commercial broadcasting can't.
Alternate options appear to be the way to go for aspiring radio broadcasters. With such an uncertain future, they're all worth considering.
I don't know what the future holds. I don't feel good about what it holds for radio.
Here's the funny thing, as you know, people have to have an education, a college degree, or be in college to get these jobs. These jobs are few and far in between. People are clawing for these jobs, and they don't even pay that well.
It's kind of ridiculous, but the skills learned in a field like radio are absolutely valuable.
I think there are so many more avenues for journalists to pursue. There are so many more options, so many web publications that are coming out, so many more opportunities. And I feel great about television. Most of my students, most of our students at SUNY Brockport go on into television, get jobs in television as journalists, as multimedia journalists. And I feel really good about that.
A brighter outlook for the field of journalism, but a harsh reality at iHeartRadio.
As far as like the big billboards or the headlines that you see about, iHeart being so community driven is just false.
It's like everything's on borrowed time. You're never safe. It doesn't matter who you are. You're never safe in that building and with that company.
iHeart is incredibly cold. I think one person had just celebrated their 30th year at this news station, and the next day they were blown out. Like, they had a big party for them. They were blown out, and it's like, what the hell?
I enjoyed the dream job for 10 years, but I'm still pretty pissed at iHeart.
Oh, it's definitely a heartless corporation. Some of us would call it the evil empire.
I think of it as me just being bitter and be like, well, they kicked me out. Who are they going to get to replace me? Nobody.
It is what it is, and you realize that you're just there as a caretaker for a little while until you aren't needed anymore.
And that's where they're going to have, I think that's their demise. They don't have a good grasp on the industry itself.
These former employees feel resentment toward the company that let them go, not the technology responsible for it.
There's nothing wrong with AI. I mean, AI is cool. It's fine. It's great that we have that technology. I don't knock it at all or blame it for the demise of people being let go. It's just, I think the people that make the decisions to let all these talented people go, they're the ones who are going to lose out. I mean, I could write down on a piece of paper about 100 different ways that they can improve their AI, but they don't got me anymore. Now I'm over here. So, that's their loss. And I probably could have wrote down another 20 or 25 ways that they could have made a ton of money that they were sitting on that they didn't go out there and get. But I'm not there anymore. And that's just one person.
Losing Dan might be iHeart's loss, but still with the company, Matt doesn't see any changes coming soon unless prompted by listeners.
So the listeners still drive what we do. If it saves the company money and listeners don't complain, it will continue to go that route. So if listeners don't mind that it's automated, listeners don't mind that it's syndicated, listeners don't mind that you don't hear any live persons on starting at 8 p.m. going all the way until 6 a.m. on some stations. If they don't care about that, if people aren't really concerned, then the station's not going to change.
So what do the listeners think?
I kind of feel like I'm being deceived. So, because they don't want us to know that they're playing it over and over again. They want us to think that it's happening, like, on air at that moment.
It was kind of heartbreaking because I feel like a lot of people who are listening to someone talk, they feel like there's like this connection. And it feels like they're actually in a conversation with someone or just sitting in on a conversation. But when you think about that it's pre-recorded, there's a little bit of a disconnect.
You knew these people and you trusted these people. And that isn't to say that there aren't some kitschy morning shows or those kinds of things. I think radio's still, the formula still lives on, but I think what's happened is there's just no originality.
Like losing local jobs for people within that community that they're broadcasting to is really unfair. And again, it kind of has an element of deception to it because we're supposed to believe they're within that city they're talking about. I don't know, it's just not right kind of thing. Somebody, I don't know, broadcasting from Long Island up here. Like, it makes no sense. You don't know what the situation is like up here, what's going on within our society, so why are you talking to me about it?
Criticisms that lead to two main takeaways. Since corporate radio has consolidated, what we've lost? Live radio and local radio personalities.
You know, the days of call in and request a song, and you know, it was always so exciting when I was a young person listening to radio, just to think I could call up and request, you know, whatever song it might be. And I felt so connected to that station and just listened for my song and waited.
Connection, what radio listeners crave, and finding a way to establish it again, that's what the industry desperately needs.
Because that's genuine, that's real. If radio is happening at that moment when you're sitting in your car and listening to it, or you're listening to it on the laptop, then you're more connected to that person that's speaking at that point in time. And I don't know, popularity is about connections. So if you can make those connections, then you're going to do better. So give me new content and maybe I'll be more obliged to listen.
Steps that iHeartRadio continues not to take, further eliminating local positions through another round of layoffs in September of 2020, and then several more in November. And given iHeart's dominance in the industry, radio professionals are left to wonder what's next.
iHeart is a great case study because they are the biggest and they have been setting the example. A lot of companies are trying to emulate what iHeart has done, some of it bad, some of it good.
Companies like Entercom, Cumulus, Cox, and Town Square.
You have to look at the audience, who is tuning in, who is listening. You know, you die if you don't attract a new audience. And so having been in radio and knowing that promotions are a big deal, and concerts and promoting concerts and those kinds of things, you know, I understand that that is still a lifeline for radio, but you have to generate a whole new audience. And I don't know if they're able to do that.
It's never really hit as far as like people really saying they love iHeartRadio. I mean, I've never felt that. Taking what I've learned from working the other side, you know, working on the dark side and on iHeart and Clear Channel, AM, FM, all the different corporations that have come and gone. The one thing that I've noticed that iHeart has not been able to do sincerely is really connect with their people. That's what I feel.
Becoming increasingly difficult with fewer personalities, a lack of local connection, and no real incentive to listen. This, paired with so many other options for consumers, can be considered the most significant threat to radio in history.
You know, I don't typically have to listen to radio, and there's nothing to compel me to do that. And I think that's what radio, and certainly newspapers, obviously, the revenue stream has just been problematic because people have so many more options.
So I feel like eventually radio is going to become obsolete.
A grim outlook for a storied industry. While showing no signs of disappearing completely, traditional radio is becoming less profitable and yielding a percentage of the careers it once did. However, choosing to view new technology and artificial intelligence as an opportunity and not a threat is a liberating perspective. While extremely sad to see the countless jobs it has cost, we must remember that the corporate radio giants like iHeartRadio are to blame, not the technology itself. If media professionals embrace these new technologies and master them, they will become adaptable enough to easily overcome whatever setbacks lie ahead. The only constant in the media industry is change, and for radio, we're in the midst of another difficult round of it. But we can take these skills and these experiences, we can apply them elsewhere. It may not be radio, and to many, that's quite sad. But ultimately, our field lives on. And what's next? We can either meet that with resentment for the past, or excitement for opportunities that lie ahead.